Hi, welcome to the Fantasy Football Clown Show. I'm your host, Ed Smith, and today we're going to take a look at a 14-team league that is in the Family Business League. So it's called the 14-team Family Business High Stakes League, and this is one of the teams that I drafted in the summer of 2020, kind of at the very beginning, and it is one of the leagues that I'm actually the commissioner of. So I have the series of family business leagues, and so this is one of those in that series. And some unique things about this league is that it's a one quarterback, one super flex league, so virtually a two quarterback league, two running backs, three receivers, and also two tight ends, three flex for a total of 12 starters. So important to kind of know what those starting positions and some of that what that'll be in the roster makeup of this team. It has 13 bench spots, 5 taxi spots, 4 IR spots for a total of 34 spots on the team. So if we divide that amongst the 32 NFL teams, that's actually just under 15 players in those 4 skill positions per NFL team. So if we take the average team, it would be 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 6 receivers, 3 tight ends. Now you could have 3 quarterbacks and only 2 tight ends, or 5 receivers, not 6. So there is some things that can happen there as far as that goes. But just important to kind of get a feel for how deep the league is and how there's really nothing available on waivers. So it's a really deep league, and as you hear in the name, it's high stakes. It's not as high as some leagues, but it's one of my bigger stake leagues, so it's something that I like to win if I can. And not that I get too caught up on the fee to get in. It's more about how many times the money can I make over the course of 10 years. And so in this league, I feel like because it pays 3 spots, need to win the league 4 times, and I'll be very profitable over the course of that 10-year period. So looking at the team, we're going to first dive into the tight ends, because I feel like that's a position that in this scoring is full point PPR, and the tight end gets 1.5 PPR, so a 50% increase just for the tight end position. So looking at the tight ends that we have here on the club, Kyle Pitts, Freiermuth, Gray, and so need 2 of those 3 to play every week. So Gray being an up-and-comer, but still looking to increase that tight end room. At the quarterback, and remember we have the super flex as well, we have Josh Allen, Mac Jones, Mills, so 3 starters of the 32 currently. We're not sure what's going to happen with Mills, but we've got 3 starters for those 2 spots, so we can cover a bye and possibly an injury. And then the team also has Brandon Allen, Kyle Allen, Drew Lock, Felipe Franks, Kellen Mond, and Sam Ellinger. And so there's some up-and-comers in that mix. And also it still had Brandon Allen because the Super Bowl was still going on, and we didn't know if Joe Burrow would get hurt. And so it was just kind of hedging that bet and not giving up that roster spot, quite yet. He would probably be the first guy that we're going to drop here on this team, or one of the first guys to drop if we needed a roster spot or to make way for the rookies. But at this point, was just going to hedge the bet and keep him on the roster, because once you drop them, you don't have them. But until you drop them, you kind of have the access to them, and if they can be worth something in the trade market, that's better than just a flat drop. So I like to hold on to as many players as we can throughout the process and build from there. But want to increase the quarterback room for sure as well. Looking at the running backs, have a stash of running backs here, because we're not sure who's going to be starters, who's going to be the bell cow kind of running backs, who's going to be in a timeshare, and what those timeshare splits look like, who's going to get hurt and going to make way for other running backs, who's going to sign new contracts. I mean, Mike Davis came out of nowhere last year and was a starter in Atlanta for a minute and would have brought great trade value, but if you drop him in April, you don't have him to trade in August when you can get something for him. So I try to learn from those types of things and hold on to players that I think may have value that I may not really intend to have on the roster in September, but I have them on the roster today just in case, as kind of a hedge. So the running backs to fill 2 spots, or possibly use some for the flexes are Leonard Fournette, David Montgomery, Harris from New England, Gaskin, Michael Carter, Royce Freeman, Jarrett Patterson, Khalil Herbert, and Mekhi Sargent. And then Tyreek Cohen as well on the IR spot. Still have him kind of dancing around there. And so currently, the way the makeup of this team is, I'm actually starting 5 running backs, even though we start 2. I have all 3 flexes with running backs. So, would like in a perfect world to have 5 top 10 tight ends and start 3 tight ends there. But at this point, as the team is made up, we're just starting the running backs because I'm starting the best available players really in those running backs or in those flex spots. At receiver, really a light situation here, but going to use the draft to really address the receiver position. And so right now we have Deontay Harris from the Saints. We have Slayton, Denami Brown, Amari Rodgers, and we need 3 of those for just the receiver room. So, really looking to pick up players, per se, in that in that group in the draft coming up. And so we're going to now take a look and encourage you to click on the roster as I go through those rosters, and you have a link there to the roster that you can look over the roster, kind of see it in front of you. And then also right below that is going to be a link to the startup draft which we had back in 2020, and I kind of want to go through that, not line by line, but just so you can kind of get a feel for how I drafted. And at this point, knowing it's a 14-team league and knowing the quarterbacks are premium, back then you could see I had the 12th pick in the draft and went ahead and I did make some trades later, but I wanted to anchor the team with a quarterback. And at that point we went with a pretty young guy, but that has really turned out since then. As you can see, here we have Josh Allen was the quarterback that we took, and just kind of looking at where Josh Allen fit in, you can see that he was, there was a couple quarterbacks that went off the board, prior to him, and so he wasn't the first quarterback off the board, even though he might be in today's world, and then would have liked to get to Dalvin Cook. As you see, he went off the board right before I picked, but there were some mistakes if you were to look at it now, but at that point I wanted to try to get a running back as well to kind of anchor the team with. And at that point I was drafting a little bit balanced, until I realized that you can't have every position. You're going to have to figure out which positions you're going to go heavy for and take them. And at this point, Cam Newton was a starter, so he was the starting quarterback at that time. So taking Drew Lock, he was a starter at that point for Denver. So this is before Teddy went there. So we're thinking back to when Teddy was in Carolina is when this draft was going on. And so as you can see, I started through that draft, and I was taking guys like quarterbacks, as you see, heavy. I did try to build the team around Noah Fant, but you can see that a bunch of tight ends came off the board before I took Fant. I did trade away a couple picks there to pick up first-round rookie picks in future drafts is what I was after, because I was looking and I was like, geez, I'm missing out on players, and I'm going to have to make this up some other time, and I'm not going to win this year anyway. And so I quickly, as the draft was coming my way, I quickly decided, okay, I've got to make trades to beef up when some of these other teams fall off. So that's part of the reason that I was taking the best available player as we would go there. But as you can see, as you scroll down, a lot of these players I took actually are no longer on the team. And I still remember taking the Taysom Hill pick, and I got rid of him before he really got a starting gig. But the reason I got rid of him is I felt like he was maybe not going to be a starting quarterback. I thought he was just going to come in on gadget plays, and I was really thinking, starting him in the quarterback spot to be a gadget player wasn't going to make as much sense as starting a Colt McCoy in the quarterback spot if Kyler Murray's hurt. And so I decided that was the way I was going to go with handcuff quarterbacks, was to have guys that would get 100% of the snaps and have them in my lineup. Like, I felt like it's better to have a guy that gets 100% of the snaps than gets 15% of the snaps and hope that he scores on those 15% of the snaps. Like, I just want a guy that's going to get 100% of the snaps, and if he throws for 2 touchdowns and 200 yards, then it's a win. Like, that's points. And if I don't have those points, that means they're on my bench, which means that I can either trade those bench points to somebody else because they need them and they'll overpay, or I'll just hold them on my bench and they don't have them. And because we only have 32 guys getting those kind of points. And so that's kind of the method to my madness in the startup draft. And then, as you can see here, if you click on the next link and we look at the startup rookie draft that happened after the fact and after the draft, I did trade out of the 104, which was the Jonathan Taylor spot, and last year that looked pretty smart. It really did. In 2020, that looked like a great trade because I traded back, and I was able to get, I'm thinking I got 3 or 4 first-round picks for that one pick. So, it still may look good, even though he is the 101 overall in fantasy football 2 years later. But at that point, I was able to get guys like Trevor Lawrence plus, like all these guys that we can get, and I didn't get Trevor, but the point is I was getting all these first round picks, and I was throwing lots of darts so that I could kick the ball down the game a little bit. And as you can see, as you get later in the draft, the chance of hitting is low, and so that's a point just to bring up. Like, I'm drafting LaMichael Pirine and Jake Luton, and those guys are like not even blips on the radar anymore. So you can tell that the hit rate later in the draft is like a nil. And so when we look at the rookie draft in 2021, so a year ago, some of those picks that we're able to get at that point, are guys like, we're able to come in and maneuver and pick up, rookies that we can really use. And I was able to, we did take Williams here, but again, even though he's a great player, Javonte Williams is a great player, I still wasn't ready to compete with his team. So moving him to pick up additional draft picks was the right way because he was a running back. And so a couple points of emphasis here that are important for us to understand is that if the running back is the right pick, and I thought Javonte Williams was the right pick in the 11th spot of this draft, right? He should go ahead of Waddle, and I actually had him ahead of Devontae Smith. So but that's the time I'm going to take the pick or trade it, and if I can't get the trade, I'll wait and trade later and get my player. I'm going to still not, I wasn't going to let Javonte Williams fall to the fantasy footballers or desperate enough that was picking there. I wasn't going to let the player fall to the next guy. I wasn't going to let him have value. So I'm going to take the value, even though I like Javonte Williams, love to have him this year, but last year he was of no value because the team couldn't win. And so I didn't need a young running back yet. I want to have running backs on a team that I think is ready to compete that year. So it's more a matter of maneuvering around and getting the players that we want to get. And so in this team, I think we're able to get Kyle Pitts. So we were able to get the 6th best player and maneuver for the 11th best player. So again, we're maneuvering around, and that trade can't happen at this draft because the draft was, if he wanted Javonte Williams at the draft, he would have taken Javonte Williams. But later in August, that's when I can make that trade, and actually I get a player that was picked higher, and that helps in this kind of situation. So it's just an important piece to always recognize that we're always gaming to get the best possible players and get pieces that we can utilize for a long time, and we're always trying to upgrade where we are with those trades. So you can see that these players that I was drafting on this board, I don't have a lot of those players anymore because I'm maneuvering around the draft board. And then there's some players that are just dart throws. When we start getting to that 3rd round, the hit rate is really low. Like, it's an important piece to know that the hit rate is really low when we get up in numbers. So we're not able to have the same kind of hit rate that we would have in other drafts, and especially with 14 teams, that third and fourth round, there's a bunch of dart throws. Now, I do have Noah Gray from the 4-12 spot still on the roster. I have Sam Ellinger from the 4-13 spot still on the roster. But then we start looking back at the 3-6 spot with Newman. He's been on 3 teams since then, and he couldn't even make the Eagles team out of camp. So, that was kind of a wasted pick. And so the hit rate isn't near as good. But when we start getting up into the second round, the first round, the hit rate's really good. I mean, usually some of those guys are something. Now in this league, as you see in the 14th pick, I took Trey Sermon. Trey Sermon wasn't anything, but I'm not giving up on Trey Sermon yet. For one reason, I have first round draft capital on him, but so do the 49ers. They have high end draft capital on Trey Sermon. So I'm not convinced that he's a zero. Just watching the way Kyle Shanahan does things doesn't mean that next year Trey Sermon doesn't come in and be the guy. Like, I feel like that happens time and time again. The guy that was the running back in one year, it doesn't seem to be the running back the next year, whether that be injury or just him changing the way he game plans and does things. And so I don't try to outsmart coaches like Kyle Shanahan. I just try to hedge all the bets and have as much exposure as I can. And so as you click on the final link and looking at the 2022 draft board, you can see where we have those picks. And so we've got a bunch of picks in the early rounds of this draft. And so, important to kind of see, where we're picking and what we're trying to accomplish. And as we talked about at the very beginning of this video, I'm going to come in with some more, I'm going to take the picks as they come. When value drops to me, I'm going to take it. I'm going to trade back for positions I don't need, knowing that this is a heavy receiver draft class. I'm relying on the draft class to give me a couple receivers. Like, I would really like to come out of here with 3 starting receivers, and I think it's really possible. And maybe they're not starting from day one, and maybe this team takes a little bit to get going. But if we get 3 receivers like St. Brown and even Tony, and I'm just trying to think of second round receivers that would be equivalent, maybe a Waddle, like a late round first guy, and all of a sudden 3 of the 6 receivers I take are those kind of players. I'll feel really good about the mixing and matching and the picking up 1 or 2 off of waivers, or if we get to a point where we're 4 games into the season and we're 4-0 and we're ready to roll, that's when I'll start to move picks to get that one last player to just take it over the top. But I'm very slow to trade picks and trade away the future unless I think it's the difference of winning or not. And so winning's really elusive, and I guess I feel like the teams that I traded away a first round pick, if I didn't win, I don't like the way that team looks the next spring, and it feels like it's a team that's in a rebuild, and I have to really do a lot of work to get it back to that point. So that's always something that I take into account before I trade away picks. And I know we've talked about trading away a pick on the 10-team league and what that feeling is, and it didn't win, but I still feel good about the trades I made there. So I always like to look back and feel good about the trades made, and then if that's the case, then I don't feel like it's a wasted situation. So I'm hoping for everybody to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and post your comments in the comments section, and tell me that you think that this team is further away than I do. I'm really gearing for this team to be in the top 7 teams, which is going to be the playoff teams this year. And so I really think there's 7 teams that are worse than this team in the league, and will really, in the 3rd year in operation, especially dominating the tight end room, which, I mean, I guess if with an injury to both tight ends, then we won't dominate the room. But without that, it's going to dominate the tight end room. And if we're dominating the tight end room in a 2 tight end league with 14 teams in the league, we're off to the races. And Josh Allen, anytime we have Josh Allen on the team as the one quarterback in a super flex league, we've got a shot. And then we start putting that with a couple rookie receivers and the running backs that we have in the running back room, and I really feel like it's got a shot to win. Now, if all those positions have injuries, then the team will not win. And then we'll have to rebuild and get more depth that we have in draft picks next year with 4 first round picks next year too. So there's more room to go. But next year the hope is that the pick from this team is very late at the end of the first round, but the other teams look like they're going the wrong direction with no first round draft capital, because we have their first round draft capital this year and then also next year. So the second year of that is when we really expect to have that as top 5 picks, if you will. So what I try to do is do that. I try to take away somebody's draft capital in year 1 and then take it away in year 2 as well, because that's when that year is the year that you're going to get the real good pick, because that's the way to replenish in a league this deep, is through that draft. And if you don't have the draft to replenish, then even if you have Derrick Henry, next year Derrick Henry is liable to get banged up, or so what's what's your pick going to be in 2023? And then even worse, what's the Derrick Henry team pick going to be like in 2024 after the 2023 season? So you just kind of keep kicking that can down the road a little bit when you have those draft picks, and you can utilize them to get it to the point where they're a first or second pick. And then if you're going to ever trade the first or second pick, then you're going to need 3 or 4 first round picks to have somebody slide into that pick, and that keeps replenishing things. So you don't always need to pick with that first or second pick. You just need to get a bunch more first round picks so that you have a shot at getting number 1 overall, which then is another payday that you can keep that team sustained into the future, especially if you don't need the player that's that number 1 overall. So that's the breakdown on the Clown Show here today for the 14-team family business high stakes team. And again, want everybody to like the video, hit the subscribe button, get the notifications, and then post your comments right in the comments section. I look forward to answering those questions, and have a great day.